So, hello out there. This is Roger Telschow. I am the guy you're going to see in some of these videos interviewing Jerry Jud. And this is an 8 DVD set that we're putting out for the 30th anniversary of Shalom Mountain. And I have with me here Joy Davey and Lawrence Stibbards, who are co-directors of Shalom Mountain. The date today is June the 4th, 2006. So we're very close to the 30th anniversary of the mountain. And you guys have been here about 15 years. You also have a history that goes back with Jerry. Gosh, when's the first time you saw Jerry?
33 years, yeah.
33 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay. So you know the full extent of his wackiness, which is good. You can speak authoritatively on that.
That's true.
But maybe just a few words. I wanted you guys to have a few words for people who might watch this. That might be a year from now. It might be 20 years from now. About what they might get out of this, or a bit about who Jerry is, maybe.
Roger, I want to start by saying how delighted I am that you asked us to introduce these DVDs and to introduce Jerry to a larger audience of people, because I and anybody, I think, who's met Jerry really sees what an incredibly unique human being he is.
Yeah.
He's a man who's lived his life on the edge, who is always thinking. He's one of the few original thinkers that I've ever encountered in my life, and he's always finding a new way to look at life, finding where the edge is in his own life, and inviting other people not to join him on his edge, but to find the edge of their own life.
It was interesting that Jerry, at the beginning of a retreat, would always say, I'm on my own journey, and I invite you to go on your journey. Don't follow me, because the next time I show up at a retreat, I'll probably be in a different place. So don't try to follow me. This Shalom Mountain is really about finding your own path.
Yeah, Jerry says that a number of times in the interviews, that this isn't just about him, or even mostly about him. It's about the journey to God and what that's about for each of us. So, what would you say to somebody watching these interviews, 10, 20 years from now?
Well, I think Jerry really, he not only was one who was willing to risk a lot. I shouldn't talk about him in the past tense. He not only is one who is willing to risk a lot.
Very much alive, isn't he?
Very much alive, absolutely. But he's also a very systematic thinker. And he thinks a lot in terms of paradigms. So he takes something like love, and he really asks the question, what is this? What is this really? What are we talking about when we talk about love? And how do we create an environment where that really is the operative principle that's going on? And he's always building models and looking at paradigms. And so I think the incredible gift of these DVDs that you've done with him is that it gives people a window into this man and how he looks at some of the important issues in our lives, like love and intimacy and sexuality and death. And his thinking about them, I think, really calls us to engage with our own thinking. That's so much of who he was, that his life calls us to really live our own lives more consciously.
It was always funny with him. You'd have a discussion with him about something like spirituality, and then it sort of sounded like we'd come to some conclusions about this. And then he'd go back at it like a dog with a bone, and he'd chew on it some more and chew on it some more. It was like he was chewing on it not only with his intellect, but he was chewing on it with his body and chewing on it with his feelings. And he had a thorough way, always had a thorough way of going after a particular topic.
It sounds as though one of the values of this series of interviews might be to stimulate some conversation in local communities. We now have about 36 people out there leading Shalom retreats, and that's growing every year. And so maybe these things will be seen by leaders and communities that are incubating some of their own ideas, and it'll jumpstart some of the discussion. I hope that's the case.
I think that will happen. I think one of the other tremendous values of these DVDs is that Jerry really provides in them some of the both the history of Shalom Mountain and the Shalom process, but also the theological and psychological underpinnings that Shalom retreats aren't something that Shalom retreats are really thoroughly grounded in a particular theology and in very solid psychological process. And Jerry's probably more than anyone the one who's really carried the knowing of that, and he speaks about that on these DVDs.
Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I think the other thing is that beyond anything that Jerry says in these DVDs, it really is an opportunity to just be in his presence. And that in itself is a treat. To see somebody who at 87 really, I think, has discovered the secret of eternal life.
It's true.
Sure has. He's one of the happiest guys on the planet. So.
Well, and I think that comes from his commitment to keep reinventing himself and sort of opening to life more and more. I mean, it's a wonderful example for all of us.
About what old age can look like. He didn't even realize that he was getting old until he was about 80, and then he started to think about it for a period of time, 2 years, and then he came out at age 82 and he said, "I'm old."
Yeah.
And he hadn't noticed that up until that moment.
Well, it's hard to imagine it when you're in his presence and he gets up and does a headstand at 87. He certainly doesn't appear old.
Yeah.
It's quite a guy.
Yes.
Well, we hope people enjoy this series, and I think the spirit in which Jerry has delivered them is with the hope that this will deepen your journey, that it will call you more in alignment with whatever your relationship to God is, and bring aliveness and vitality to your life, and a lot more love in the world. So that's our hope.
And if you haven't done so, we hope that one day you'll visit us at Shalom Mountain.
What a concept.
What a concept.
Yeah, great idea.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Jerry's making breakfast for us.
Jerry's doing it, boy.
Are you trying to corner and you can't get back?
4 friends and his wife.
Oh,
Yep,
they do know that there's
the master chef.
Well, I won't say that, but I can cook. Enough so that I enjoy eating my own food.
we used to have cavalry that they closed. And they were like hardware store and everything. And man, they made money everything.
Now I need to get some more eggs.
So he finally gave up.
Yeah, we've got some potatoes cooking over here, and
Well, there is our new friend, Frank.
Did you sleep pretty good?
Huh?
Did you sleep pretty good?
When morning gilds the skies, my heart awakening cries, let's have a good time.
I don't think I got a oh, yes, I did. Do a second one too.
They went.
that's great.
Small glass.
Why don't I share this with Nina? Here you go, Nate.
Yeah, some of these glasses are what you want.
This is like a Texas glass.
Actually,
I'll just put a certain amount in, you can get some more.
thank you, dear. Here's your other one if you want it.
Everybody
Oh my
got it?
goodness, what a treat.
Everybody got it?
Got it.
Here's to you, fellas.
All right. 3 cheers to breakfast at Jerry and Georgiana's.
About being small is exciting to you. Because when I first had...
Hello, Gerald.
Nice of you to come to see me, Roger.
It's,
I know you came to see Georgiana, but it's nice to see you. You know,
I love to see Georgiana,
That's
actually.
right. So I'm glad to be included in your visit.
Yeah. We're here, it's September 24th, 2004. We're here at Jerry and Georgiana's, and thought it would be interesting to have a conversation about the journey to God. Something that's been important to me lately, and we're going to try to enunciate a little bit so that the camera picks up our voice. This has been an important year for me in the journey to God, exploring the mystical experience. And I know it's something that you've been involved in for years, really poking around in these areas. So, don't know just how to start the conversation other than to say, where are you at the journey right now?
Well, let's talk about you first,
Oh, okay.
because how long have you been on the journey, and how long have you used the concept of journey as a way of looking at your life? Is that quite recent, or have you always seen your life as journey?
No, I think it's more recent. And I think the Shalom retreat process really opened me to that. Really, my big life change came in 1995 when I was just really open to the whole idea of life being its journey, rather than a series of achievements and a destination. And since then, it's been a bit of a wild ride at times. But I think the real sense of being one with the divine is pretty new to me.
The concept that the journey is to God, not to death, but the journey is to God,
Yeah,
or not to achievement, or not to something.
yeah.
But somehow you have now gotten focused on the idea that your journey is to God.
That's where I'm tasting. I think around the edges, and sometimes I feel like I drop in.
What do you mean you drop in?
Well, there's a place that I go occasionally that is seemingly very devoid of ego, where ego really sits in the back rows, and just I am absorbed into the divine.
How do you do that?
Well, typically through a letting go that often involves breath.
Breath control.
Well, energizing myself with breath.
Yeah.
And then there seems to be a little voice in me that listens and speaks from a different place. It's almost like a different set of senses.
Like maybe you have an inner teacher that is trying to get your attention.
An inner teacher? Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of an invitation to journey in this very fluid way that isn't about striving, that isn't even about trying to grasp knowledge, but is about flowing into and surrendering into a different way of being. It's very hard to put words to it.
Yeah, but it's important to try to, because I think one of the things about mystical experience is that we somehow want somebody else to reflect back to us what's going on. Like, it's lonely just doing it by yourself. So I think I keep trying to say to my friends what's happening to me and what I'm doing. And every once in a while I get an echo back, from a friend who says, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I mean, I've been there too. So, I guess maybe what's going on between us now, we both have the capacity to listen to the other person.
Mm.
And I want to hear you, what your experience is, and then maybe you can listen to what my experience is, and maybe what you have experienced will make it possible for you to hear me, and for me to hear you. So, well, what does God feel like?
What does God feel like? Yeah. Well, God feels like everything that has ever been, everything that ever will be. All is well. All is well.
Everything's okay.
Everything's okay.
Even all the blood and guts in the world, and all the tragedy and all the suffering in the world, it's all okay.
It's all okay.
Everything's all right.
Yeah, it's all on the same plane.
I made a 9-month tour in the third world years ago, 1972, 73, and I decided to take a whole bunch, a nest of questions with me that I would ask in any culture I went to. And one of them was, what does God smell like? What does God taste like? What does God look like? What does God feel like? And I guess I left one out. But anyhow, I was sitting in Samoa with a great big fat woman, and she was sitting on my right side, and I said, what does God taste like? Blood, she said. I was amazed how quick she said blood. And it was quite a profound answer, that God tastes like blood. So what does God taste like to you? What does God smell like? What does God feel like? What does God sound like?
Sound and feel I can relate to more. The sound is like the sound of a tuning fork.
God is the sound of a tuning.
It is absolute purity of vibration.
Could be Gounod's Sanctus, for example, or some great piece of Mozart's.
The breath of God. If music now sounds to me more like it is the breath of God. Feels like all. Feels like one. Feels like the totality of existence. Expansive and infinitely small.
Can you find God with your nose?
Fire. Smells like fire.
God smells like fire.
Yeah. It's interesting that images that you see, the sacred fire, never really made any sense to me. The Om, never really connected with that. But through this deepening of my knowing of God, now suddenly that I connect with that, it just makes sense.
Like Om.
Om. Just this vibration that comes from the nether regions, just...
Could be that God is a vibration?
That is what it seems like to me. This tuning fork vibration is... eternal.
Yeah.
Always was, always will be.
Maybe there isn't anything but vibration. Maybe that's all there is.
Yeah. It's all energy.
Well, everything is energy.
Yeah.
God is energy. So God feels like energy.
Very much so. Yeah. Infused in everything. There isn't anything that isn't God.
Everything is God.
Everything is God. Now see, my ego wants to know what the hell are you talking about, you know? I mean, this is all so airy-fairy sounding.
But maybe your ego wants to prance around in the world too and say, I'm God, I'm God. Then it puts you in the booby hats, right?
I did that for a lot of years.
Yeah.
I think I still do that sometimes.
So if God is everything, then you are God.
Mm-hmm.
Try that out.
God is everything, I am God.
No, say I am God.
I am God.
Tell these folks out here you're
I
God.
am God. But you'd like to know that I am God. Good to be with you. It is a stretch.
Folks, this is God. You've been looking for God all your life. Here he is. Here she is. Here he is.
Yeah.
God is in your midst. Mm-hmm. God is in your midst.
Mm-hmm.
God is in his holy temple.
I am the light of the world.
Yeah. You are the light. You
I'm the light.
You are the light of the world.
Now, why is it so difficult to say that?
What do you think?
You're not going to give me any answers, are you? I'd answer it all.
Why is it so difficult?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think
Something gets in the way here.
yeah.
What do you think it is?
I think for me, it's a lot of old story that is about God is out there, and if I'm lucky, I can beseech God to visit me occasionally,
Yeah.
grant me a few wishes.
Yeah.
A
A few.
but, you know, only if I'm really good, earn it.
Yeah.
So it's really living into a whole new paradigm of accepting that I am infused with God and God is infused with me.
You say you're God. Is George Bush God?
George Bush. is
George
God.
W. Bush. You
Well,
say
I
God?
think senior and junior. That's
What?
senior and junior Bush is
They're both
God.
God.
Yeah.
Well, what about all the things in the world we don't like that is God?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are a lot of things in this world that we don't like. I mean, there's something fearsomely wrong to me about the fact that millions of children are born in this world without any hope of self-actualization, self-realization. And they're never going to have a chance. And that there is somehow the way in which things are ordered on this planet that don't seem to go along with what you're saying. What about that? What
Yeah.
about it?
Why is
Well,
suffering
I guess
allowed?
or what we call evil, you know,
Right.
of which our present president has vowed to overcome totally for us all on
Yeah.
our behalf. He's going
Get rid of the evildoers.
he's going to get rid of evil. Evil. So, what about evil? And this idea, this feeling that you have that you are God. Why don't you do something about it?
Well, I wrestle with that. I think the old story about God would say that God is purity and light, and it's a dualistic universe. That's the old story.
That's that's
Yeah.
not the new story. Where'd you get this new story?
Well, the new story really flies in the face of that. For me, it is that war and suffering and deprivation is somehow part of what
You are.
part of what I am, part of what the universe is made of. You know, I mean, stars supernova and destroy whole sectors of galaxies. So birth and destruction and what we call good and evil, there's a constant cycle of this. There's something about this vibration, this energy that expresses, that evolves, that is ever unfolding.
It feels to me like you're reaching for a bigger view of what God is, or who God is. Right? I mean, that your God seems to be getting bigger and bigger, but also it seems to be getting away from right and wrong and up and down and in and out. Like somehow the imposition of the human equation upon the scene has a lot to do with how we view God, how we view this thing, and it seems to me that if we have a concept of God, we have to have a concept of what people talk of as evil and have to do with suffering and the fact of inequality and the fact that some people who are born into this world don't have a chance. Don't have a chance at all. And somehow a human being's role in how this is manifesting in the world. So I guess I want to see how your picture of suffering and evil and inequality and injustice fits into the fact that you are God.
That's a lot to swallow.
Well, I guess we don't need to swallow it. Maybe we just need to chew on it.
I think that the thing that has become clear to me is that so long as God is out there somewhere, I am relieved of responsibility.
So as long as God is out there,
Right.
you're relieved, but when you are God, you are somehow it.
I'm a co-creator. I am the creator.
You're a co-creator. You are
Right.
the creator.
Mm-hmm.
That's getting dangerous. don't
It's
you think?
mighty dangerous. And yet, it's very empowering, isn't it? But it has a real dangerous feel. You know, the ability to be arm's length from God and you know, to essentially beg God through prayer to make things better.
Everything's his job, right?
Right. It's like, Daddy, take care of me.
So what you're getting to is everything is your job.
Well,
That's
It-
not dangerous.
in part,
is it?
yeah. That's not dangerous?
It is dangerous.
It
'Cause
is
how could
dangerous.
you sleep at night?
Yeah, well, I've struggled with that.
I mean, how can you sleep at night when you're responsible for the whole damn thing?
Yeah. Well, that's I think part of what has hit me in the last 6 months or so.
Like, one of the things, I've known you for very long, but I know you long enough to know that you are also one of those who has carried the world on your shoulders. You know,
Yeah, I thought I was the Messiah for a while.
so you're not the Messiah, but you are God.
Yeah. I don't think I want to get crucified though. So I'm not the Messiah, but I am God.
That's cute. That's cute. You're not the Messiah, but you are God.
Well, not the way I know the Messiah. I mean, absolve all the sins, make it all right. That's a lot to.
That's
It's a
not
lot.
asking even of God, right?
Yeah, I think it
Making
is.
it all right.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, when I was a young preacher, there was a book came out by J.B. Phillips called Your God is Too Small. And it was a very seminal book for me because I realized that Christianity, with its complete dedication to dualism, would always hold me into a very small God. That those of us who are damned to try to figure things out have to take into account the fact that we have, when we're trying to build a paradigm of the universe, have to figure out whether we are monists or whether we are dualists. And Christianity and Judaism and the Muslim religion are all firmly committed to a dualistic universe, which ends up, from the point of view of human behavior, in terms of good and bad, and right and wrong, and in and out.
Yeah.
And Buddhism and Hinduism, there's two other major religions, I would say, are monistic, who believe that, let's take, for example, in Hinduism, the concept of Kali. Kali is the god of creation, and she is the goddess of destruction. She is the goddess of life, and she is the goddess of death. So that in the concept of the deity, everything is hidden. And that's in a way where you are approaching. You're not there yet, but you're moving in the direction of a monistic philosophical style in building your paradigm of the universe and your paradigm of God. That God is everything. If God is everything, then God is destruction as well as creation. God is death as well as life. God is
Ecstasy and suffering.
God is ecstasy, and God is yes, that's right. Whatever the opposite of ecstasy is, I think it may be a dull sermon or something like that. I mean, but the point is that in monism, God is not the good side, and the devil is the bad side. But God is everything. When all of a sudden, when you move into a monistic view of God, God becomes huge. And the imposition of human values upon the scene is the imposition of human values. Like in the name of Jesus Christ, the God of love and the God of peace, the Christian church burned probably 1 million women to death during the Inquisition. Burned them up. In the name of Jesus, right? Well, this is an imposition upon the God image by the human equation. But this is where dualism ends up, because it ends up in right and wrong, and I'm right and you're wrong, right? And this is true whether you're talking about my church or your church, or my nation or your nation. It is a road that does not lead to anything but hell. So I would like to encourage you to look at monism as a basic building block for your paradigm of the universe and your paradigm of who God is for your life. It feels like surrender to isness. Let's see if I can say this. In having a view of God that is both huge and magnificent, is to move into a world of surrender and a moving away from fighting. from the point of view of your own interior energy, the energy inside of you, that surrender means to embrace isness. The fact that there are not a few thousand, but there are millions of babies being born who have no chance and will have no chance in this world for self-actualization. It means eating it. It means eating this truth. And that's hard. I mean, that is very hard to eat it.
It means giving up striving.
It means to giving up moving in the, means after the attempt at striving, which you have been through, if I hear correctly from you, it moves away from striving, which is that if I do enough, if I do it, if I do, and I become great, and I become famous, and I become known, that then I will have it made. And it will never happen. So it is getting old enough and experienced enough to know that striving will lead finally to an empty bucket. And that to move into the realm of being, like you say, I am God, of being God, then you have to fill that bucket with what that means, to be God, to be. So you're moving the call of, I believe that the call of the spiritual journey is the calling away from doing as a primary drive to being, out of which then the doing may come. Now that's a big issue, big thing, because it isn't as though spiritual journeyers, because they get away from striving, are no longer compassionately doing in the world. What they're doing now has a different source. It has a different genesis in your psyche, and everything about you is a striver. And you may even become a striver in spiritual journeying, so that you become a better striver than somebody else.
Sure.
So striving is, in a way, the workshop of the negative side of us as human beings, and we believe in the culture that we're in that we'll make it if we strive enough. If we strive and strive, we will make it.
Right.
But I think a lot of old dogs, including myself, and I've been a big time striver in my life, it won't work. It won't work.
You come up with an empty bucket.
Empty bucket. So then you got to have another bucket, and you look in there and you say, now what is the basic paradigm of my life? What am I doing here? What am I supposed to be doing here? Which are the basic journey question. What am I doing here? And to move from striving over to being. And in being, there is this experience that you tell me about when you feel that somehow your ego is transcendent. And you experience something. You see, I think it is perfectly compatible to say I am God, and at the same time to say that I am no better than my fathers. I'm no better than anybody else. I mean, to be able to say I am, and the thing for which I long is the transcendence of my ego and of my union with God. Now, when when you say, I am God, that is an intellectual concept. When you say, I have an experience in which my ego is transcended, then you have found God. In other words, the intellectual concept of how to find God and how to be God and so on, it's all up in your mind. But when you have an experience of the transcendence of ego, which you told me one experience that you had, that you found that there are other dimensions of consciousness than what I call the flatland. Flatland consciousness is full of up and down and in and out and right and wrong. That's flatland. The consciousness that you told me about had nothing to do with up and down and in and out and right and wrong. Nothing.
Doesn't use any of the same terminology. It's a whole different animal.
It's a whole different, all of a sudden, the sky, like something opened up in your consciousness and you saw light. You saw light and you saw unity and you saw
Total acceptance,
yeah,
unity, oneness.
and you, when the experience was over, you were no longer having experience, but you had peace. I mean, you were very peaceful, and you were able to say, whether Bush gets elected or not, I am. You know, whether there are millions of children dying in Africa, I am. Whether whether I make a profit this month or not, I am. And it was it was another world.
So moving, I think this is where a lot that I have gotten hung up with this is that the old paradigm, let me change this tape. I think this is where I've gotten hung up a good bit, is that how can I have this awareness, this sense of unity and beingness, isness, and then this desire to bring it out into the world. And what I hear you saying is that usually we're putting the cart before the horse. We're really doing, attempting somehow to sort of engineer our salvation.
You know, like I've had a great experience, I can't wait to lay it on somebody and tell them that they should have it too.
Right. Here it is. It's written right here. You can have this experience.
Right.
Right. But
And that makes me greater than you because I had a greater experience than you.
Right.
There's a lot of little pitfalls.
I've got a lock on the knowledge. I think what you told me yesterday was don't build an altar at the base of this experience that you had, these experiences. No. Don't build an altar there.
No, find out a way of being there regularly. I mean, when people talk about, one of the things that Paul says is pray without ceasing. Pray without ceasing. And this used to trouble me all the time. You know, how the hell could you pray without ceasing? You know, I mean, you wouldn't have a chance to do much else. But the point is that when you have found what you found, well, you have found something exquisitely precious, because now you know beyond any shadow of a doubt that there is another consciousness in the flatland. You know that. Now, what you're asking is this something that I experienced one time in my life? And in the medieval period, when you read a lot of the Christian saints, anyhow, I've read many other types, but some of them spent their whole life working for one great experience, you know? And I say, whoa, why do that? Why not do it every day? Why wait for a whole lifetime to do it? So this leads me in this short talk with you to say that if you are on journey, then you have to have a discipline which leads you to the place where you want to be. Now, an airplane pilot who's flying, let's say, a 747, he has to practice all the time. He cannot just say, well, I know how to fly a 747. He's got to keep on studying and keep on working with the vibrations of the machine and all that kind of thing. So a spiritual journeyer who wants to take his journey to God, with God, being God, seriously, needs a discipline which allows him to get what Wordsworth wrote this poem about, intimations of immortality. That is, the experience, the pointers, the vibrations that lead to what now you value more than anything else in your life. I believe that this experience you had is now the most important thing about your life. Now, to take it seriously, you need a way to find that with regularity, because one of the interesting things about myth is that it carries truth for us when all of a sudden we wake up to it. So I'm going to give you, you know, the story of the children of Israel who were wandering around for 40 years in the wilderness. That's a long time to wander, boy. And they didn't have anything to eat. So God gave them manna in the wilderness. It is some kind of a bread that floated down from heaven. And the rule was that they could eat it that day. But if they tried to stave it up, you know, have a store, a pantry, it turned rot and got worms in it, so it was unfit to eat. So that's the way it is with this field, energy, and with mystical experience, that if you want to be with God, then you have to have a technology, pardon the word, for being with God. And you have to have a discipline so that they say, well, where does Roger spend his time? Will he spend his time? Well, what about his spiritual journey? Well, he thinks about it from time to time, but that won't do. I mean, if you're going to do the spiritual journey with great seriousness, then you have to have a technology for being where you want to be, and where you want to be is not on the flat land. It's what I hear from you, that you don't want to live in the flats.
I'm sort of, as we're going along here, I'm sort of saying, well, someone may watch this video, you know, a year from now, who knows?
Yeah.
And may be saying to themselves, well, that's all well and good, but how do I find my discipline? How do I get on my mystical journey?
You have to find it. I mean, it's like a teacher, or maybe even an old dog, you know, living in a mountain where you came today, cannot tell you the answer, but he might be able to say, look over there under that rock, you know, or look in this hole over here, or, you know, maybe if you go through this trap door, that basically a teacher can be a pointer and tell you, you know, you might look here or there, but you have to find it yourself. Because doing what somebody else did, or what worked for somebody else, may not work for you at all. And that's why I think even after, you know, you're going to be one of the people who found it, right? So you have to be careful that you don't go around telling everybody what to do, because it doesn't pay off. It doesn't do any good, except to say, well, maybe, you know, this is what I tried, and this is what's working for me. You know, this is what's working for me. But I think we need to discipline so that every day we are spending time reaching. No, I always think that we need to find a way of doing it every day, of transcending ego, which is the big thing, because The ego is a very important tool that we have. Like the mind is a very important tool, but the mind shouldn't run our life and the ego shouldn't run our life. What should run our life, potentially, I think, is our hunger to be reunited with the all, so that our life is full of peace and joy and love. And that the opposite are also, we have a choice, you know. And they're all God. What is the opposite of love is God too. What is the opposite of joy is God too. What is the opposite of peace is God too.
So maybe it's, as Kabir says, it's to follow the longing. It's to follow the hunger.
Yeah, and the bliss. Don't forget the bliss. I mean, the bliss is big dog, big, big, big. When it comes to God,
Good signpost, huh?
bliss is it, because as we were saying at breakfast, feeling good is it. You know, feeling good, and God feels very good. God also feels very bad, but I have felt bad and I felt good. I like good better. And so why mess around with bad when you can feel good? But God is feeling bad and God is feeling good. And you have to decide what you want to do. You know, whether you want peace or whether you want misery, or whether you want joy or whether you want,
Now this gets all wrapped up in, I can hear people saying, well, it just sounds like so much hedonism, so much, just go for all the good stuff and just immerse yourself in the luxury of denial. I mean, that is part of what our culture says about that.
well, if denial works for you, then do it. I mean, denial is just as good as not denial. But denial usually has gotten me in trouble, right? But the denial is just as much. There's not a philosophical problem that cannot be approached dialectically. There's none. Every philosophical problem can be approached dialectically. And so God, you might say God is dialectic. That everything that you can say about God, you can say the opposite. Everything. But the question is, how do you want to experience how do you want to experience the end of your journey now? You have to ask that question every day. How do you want to experience the end of your journey now? In other words, for the spiritual journeyer, every day is the only day he's got. Every day is the only day he's got. And every day is his death day. And every day is his life day.
So, to die fearlessly, we must live fearlessly.
I would rather use the word ecstatically. I would say to die ecstatically is to live ecstatically. I used to say, where I used to teach on Shalom Mountain, that you make love like you live, and you live like you make love. And that is the way it is. And can't get away from it. It's all, everything hangs together. All works together when we take a monistic approach. If you take a dualistic, I want to keep, shoving this job for you, because in a way, an old dog is now giving a young dog a job. I believe that if you work through the issue of dualism and monism, you will be a long way down your journey. Because everything in Western civilization is built upon the concept of dualism. Everything. And it is a trap. It is a philosophical, theological, cosmological trap. And a trap rhymes with crap, right? I mean, there's a real sinkhole As soon as you move away from the dualistic equation, you have entered a whole new territory, philosophically, religiously, and mystically. And you save yourself an awful lot of trouble.
Who are the leaders of this sort of ideology, this different picture of things?
You have to go to Eastern. You have to go to Eastern religion. You have to go to Buddhism, and you have to go to Hinduism, philosophically. But that doesn't mean you have to become a Hindu or you have to become a Buddhist. But when you're on spiritual journey, as you are, then I think you can say, I will not learn from one source. I will open myself to all the great avatars who have ever lived. And they are in all the religions of the world. And they are also all stuck with the problem of institution, because most of the philosophical thinkers are stuck somewhere in the institution of religion. And that religion has made its decision about this question. So,
and then it becomes a defensive.
It becomes
a defensive argument
to
try to defend the institution in every situation.
So I say the way to approach the issue of dualism and monism is to open yourself to great spiritual teachers, and you may, also from a point of view of the history of knowledge, go somewhere just to see how this debate has been carried on. And because the Holy Roman Empire, at that period of time, pretty much set Western culture on the path that it's on, the decision was made for dualism. And so all of the religion on the right on America, all fundamentalism is hooked in dualism. So it's a big trap, and your psyche is deeply embedded in it. So when you can spring the trap, you will be in another company. So I've emphasized very strongly dualism and monism, and I've also said to you that you cannot build an altar. You cannot build an altar to an experience. You need to allow that experience to tease you into new behavior and into new ways in which you spend your time and your energy. So
it's a journey.
It's a journey, and it's very exciting. It's very exciting. And the next thing you will do, you will start developing a hunger to be with some people who can hear what you're saying, because most people will not hear it. Because to be willing to commit to this journey means that you have to take a chance of losing everything.
Yeah, well, your friends could change, your relationship with family could change, your relationship to job, spouse.
Pilgrim's Progress, which is probably by John Bunyan, is probably, has been always seen as the classic picture of journey, a spiritual journey. And it begins by the pilgrim leaving his house with his wife and his kids screaming after him.
So we must be prepared to leave home.
Right, exactly. And home, your home is the culture you were born in. And all the rules and regulations and all the strictures and containment, the prison houses of your soul, are all passed on to you by your culture. So sooner or later, the spiritual journeyer, becomes countercultural. Jesus, for example, is a countercultural hero, a paradigm or a he was counter his culture in regard to women, in regard to religion itself, you know, and the observances of religion, observances even of the Sabbath, for example. He said, you know, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Man is not made for institutions. He's made to unfold. He's made to grow a soul. So Jesus was a very countercultural being, and sooner or later the person on a spiritual journey has to shake himself loose from the strictures that culture has laid upon him, and has to break out. It's almost like a butterfly breaking out of a cocoon.
So Jesus was a mystic.
Jesus was a mystic, yeah. You bet he was a mystic. Yeah. He was a classical, he is a classical mystic. And most people would say, looking at him, crazy as a hoot owl. You know, in his culture. That's why they had to kill him. So, society moves on the basis of consensus. And on spiritual journey, you move out of consensus. You move out of the consensus of the society that you're in.
By definition. You're on a spiritual journey.
Just what?
If you're on a spiritual journey, by definition, you're going to move
By
out of
definition, you're going to move out of the cultural consensus. There is a cultural consensus right now that in this country, you know, that war is good. That war is good. That war is necessary. And killing people, and men, women, and children, you know. We always remember to mention, you know, these 1,000 soldiers that are killed from the U.S., but probably 30,000 Iraqis have been killed. You know?
Right.
And there have been a lot of women and children killed in the process. So, I guess I'm sitting here talking with you because I'm taking serious the fact that you are on a journey, and you have had an initial mystical experience which haunts you. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I want to give you some counsel. First counsel is, don't get in a hurry. Don't try to eat the grapes when they're green. Give yourself time to just give yourself time in the world of being. More and more time in the world of being, where you are not doing a damn thing. When you're not doing anything, you're just being. More time for that.
It's part of the discipline you
I would
speak
say
about,
one of the I have an inner teacher, and quite often after the initial experience, she says to me, "What's your hurry? Why are you hurrying? Why are you hurrying even cleaning the dishes? Why are you even taking? Why are you hurrying taking a dump? You know, what's the hurry? Why are you hurrying? Why are you hurrying? Where are you going?" Now, I heard you say today that your answer to that is that you're going to God. Now, it's easy to say going to God, and then that bucket has to be filled up with your stuff, with not my stuff, but your stuff. And I think a guy like an old dog like me can say to a young dog, you might think about this, or you look at that, but it's not yours till you make it yours.
Don't be in a hurry to fill up the bucket.
That's right. So our hour's just about up. You want to round something off?
Sure. Well, I just appreciate your time and appreciate what you bring to the world. It's inspiring to me, and I hope perhaps this conversation will inspire others.
Thank you.
Well, I want to say that your energy is hopeful. You have, from I experience your energy as hopeful, and it's exciting for me as an old dog to see a young dog sniffing around, smelling around in the bushes and lifting his leg here and there, kind of, looking around. And it's very exciting to me. And I hope we continue our friendship. I think there's hardly a greater joy in my life than being with friends I love who want to tell me about their journey. So it's been a great